Okay, so a lot of people told me they'd like to know about docking. So I wasn't too sure what it was, so I typed it into Google. Then I realized that my safe search was turned off. So I turned it back on, and then I Googled docking, and it made a lot more sense. So here is how to dock your AYN Thor to an external monitor. So please excuse the mess, but you'll see here that I've got my AYN Thor hooked up via a USB hub to my second monitor with two different DualSense controllers. So I've currently got Mortal Kombat Charlie Monks on the co-op mode. So if I move controller 1, you'll see Kung Lao runs around, and if I move controller 2, we'll see Liu Kang moves around. So they are separate. So let me show you how I did this. So before we get started, there is going to be a few things that you're going to need. Obviously, you're going to need some way to connect your Thor to your TV or your monitor. So I have this. This is the Newmight adapter. It's quite a cheap one I've had for a good few years now. It does the job. You can use any one. I'll leave a link to this one in the description. It will be my affiliate link. So if you want to support the channel, you can buy through that. Or you can just have a look on Amazon and see which one takes your fancy. So in here, I've got a couple of USB ports, got a USB-C port to plug in a charger so you can charge the device at the same time you're docking it. And then there's also my HDMI adapter on the bottom. Obviously, if you prefer to use something like DisplayPort, get one with DisplayPort. So you're also going to need your controllers. So if you're just doing this single player, you can just use any Bluetooth controller. However, for this test, I'll be doing multiplayer. So I have here, I've got two DualSense controllers. I've got my Death Stranding one and my Astrobot one. So one thing I have noticed is if you have two controllers that are the same name, it assigns them a different ID in the background. So do be wary of that. It can trip some people up when it comes to mapping the controls. However, you can use any Bluetooth controller. I think I've tested out on I've got an 8-bit Do SN30 Pro here. So any compatible Bluetooth controller, but I'll be using my dual senses for this. Okay, so once you've got all your necessary equipment available, first thing we want to do is we're going to get our controllers paired. So I have covered this before, but I've not shown how to pair multiple controllers. I believe the Thor has a limit. I think it's an Android based limit. You can connect up to 8 Bluetooth devices at once. I don't have that many friends, and being honest, I imagine most of you probably don't either. That's why we're here. So I've tried this with 2. I believe 4 is kind of the sweet spot. I think any more than that, you'll start to notice a lot more latency between the input and the response because obviously the amount of Bluetooth signals that are going to a single device. So what we do is we go to our settings, go to connected devices. I'm going to pair a new device. So for the DualSense controller, in order to pair it or put it into pairing mode, you need to hold your share button or your select button and the PlayStation button just for a few seconds. And it should start to, you'll see it, I don't know if you pick on the camera, it'll start to flash like that. And now if I go to pair new device and then scroll down, there it is, DualSense wireless controller. Okay, so you'll have this little checkbox allowing access to the contacts and call history. Uh, I mean, you can hold it like a phone, but it's not going to hear call history on it, so we'll just pair that. And now I'm also going to do the exact same thing. But what I'm going to do before I pair this one is I'm going to, because I have two identical controllers or two DualSense controllers, I'm going to rename this one so I know which is which, because that can trip people up. So I'm just going to call this one DualSense Wireless, and I'll call this one DS2, because it's the Death Stranding controller. And then for this one, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my Astrobot controller. So I'll press pair. I will hold my buttons to put it into pairing mode. It's in pairing mode. And then there we are as another DualSense. And we'll pair that as well. And then I'll just rename this one as well. So I'll just call this one Astro. There we go. So both of those are paired. So now what I'm going to do is, for this example, like I showed at the beginning, I'll be using Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks in Nether SX2, and I'll be showing off Mario Kart on Eden. So the Duck Station for PS1, the process is the exact same as Nether SX2. So we'll go straight into the emulator itself. We'll go to our burger menu on the left. We'll go to controller settings. So for controller port 1, make sure it says DualShock 2. And then we'll do automatic mapping for... Now, this is a little bit annoying because even though I've renamed these controllers, when... I don't know if it happens to every emulator, but Nether SX2 in particular hasn't differentiated between the two, even though I have. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick this one. And if you see, if I go down to... You see next to these buttons here, where it says there's a 13 next to them. So I know that the internal ID of the controller is 13. So now if I go over to controller port 2 and enable it, so I'm going to set that to DualShock 2. I'm going to do automatic mapping and then pick the bottom option. You'll see that that is 14. So make sure you've got two different IDs. If you're using the same controller, obviously if you've got, say, an 8-bit DOE and a Switch Pro controller, or whichever mishmash you're using, it'll be a bit more obvious. I don't need to touch any of the mappings for this because it's a PlayStation controller doing PlayStation mappings. So now all I need to do is, if I boot up my game, to do Mortal Kombat. So one thing to know is whilst these controllers are paired, you can use the touchpad as a mouse. I will also show later on what happens if we input a keyboard. So I'll just skip through these initial bits. One thing to note as well, that the bottom screen is not accessible externally. So basically the way the bottom screen works is the device is kind of tricked into treating it as an external display. I've only been able to get the top screen to display on an external device, not both screens, not the bottom screen. I've been through the settings, I've had a look. If there's anyone out there who knows a way to do that, please let me know in the comments and I'll update a video and cover that. But from what I can see, it's only the top screen. So now we're on the main menu. We're going to go into our co-op mode. So you can see I can move both controls independently. It's not very well demonstrated on this, but if I'll just do some character selects, we'll get into the game itself. We'll need to move that out the way. So as this is through, I'll just turn the volume up a little bit. So as this is through HDMI, or currently through USB-C, then the sound will also output through the TV or the monitor. So in my initial testing video, it was running through the built-in speaker in the monitor, which isn't the best quality. However, if you're hooking it up to a TV and you've got those nice big internal speakers, or you have an extra USB device in there for an external sound source, then you'll notice a great improvement. Well, I can skip this. Go for that. One thing to note as well is you can close the lid on the device when it's docked. And it won't. It'll turn the displays off, but it will still output to your external device. Good upgraded. So hopefully, yeah, once he's finished talking, we can see that for my player 1 controller, I've got Liu Kang, so he's running around in circles. And for my player 2, I've got Kung Lao. So I can control them both separately. So enough playing with myself, and let's have a look at doing the same thing on Eden. So the process will be the same. I've already paired the controllers. We just need to make sure we map them to the relevant ports. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go over to Eden. And then in our settings for our mapping controllers, so for player 1, I'm going to leave them as a controller type. We can auto map a controller, and then you'll see here I've got wireless controller 1, wireless controller 2. So we'll start with 1. And then I don't actually know how it will handle these, so I think it's usually just those face buttons that are the issue. One thing to note as well, especially if you're using 8-bit DOE controllers, so this will be covered in the instructions that you get with the controller, but it has multiple different pairing modes. So one of them is your standard X input, which is like a kind of PC controller, an Xbox controller. One of them is I think it's like a generic input, and then one of them is a Switch Pro input. So do check the controls. I think it depends if you hold start and then one of the face buttons. So that's just something to note if you're using an 8-bit Do controller. So now I'll do the same thing for 2. We'll auto map 2. We'll say it's connected. Yep, it's a Pro Controller. Make sure that's auto mapped. And then I'll just quickly check the face buttons. I always found when mapping buttons, if you're familiar enough with a controller, go by the direction, not necessarily the button prompt. I play a lot of PlayStation games. I know those 4 symbols like the back of my hand. Between playing Switch and Xbox games, I can sometimes get a bit thrown because the A and the B is different, the X and the Y is different, but I digress. So now that's done. You can see as well, I can also control the menu with the controls. If you're sat on the sofa or you're sat in bed, you can just do it this way. So let's boot up Mario Kart, and then hopefully we can get a nice 2-player Mario Kart, and I can spend a little bit more time playing with myself. So we'll go to multiplayer. Oh, I pressed the X button, that cancelled it. We'll do a little versus race. So we'll do Mario, and then if I go over here, I control player 2. We'll do good old Mario versus Luigi. And then, like I said before, totally independent control on each controller. So I'll just pick some random bits, and then we will OK. It's going to be quite hard to demonstrate by playing on my own, but yeah, hopefully you get the gist. So I've got the player 1 is Mario. So Mario is leaving Luigi in the dust. However, Luigi can also play catch up. Like I said, I believe 4 is the sweet spot. So if you're playing 4-player Mario Kart, you shouldn't have any issues. Any more than that, I think I pressed the wrong button. Hey. It's my fault for setting down stuff on my desk. Any more than that, you might start to notice some latency issues. So there we are. That is how to dock your Thor. So what I'm quickly show before I go is if you've got a mouse and keyboard installed. But what I'll have to do for this is because my mouse and keyboard is currently connected to my PC, I'll have to switch back to my phone and do it from there. So see you shortly. Okay, so what I've done here, so I've connected everything to the USB hub, which I showed you earlier. I've got my mouse and my keyboard via USB, and I've got my HDMI out going into my monitor here. Like I said, you can only see the top screen. There's no way to cast the bottom screen. The screen on the Thor is off. I can close that. That's absolutely fine. One thing I recommend is if you want this to be a bit more of a kind of living room kind of hub, I recommend having a front end like ESDE, or a front end that's designed for a single screen that has controller support. So what I can do is, my mouse is just coming back to life, there we go. So I can click and I can interact with it as normal. I can use my keyboard, all natively. I've not had to do anything special, I've just plugged them in, and that's the same for the HDMI. So what I'm going to do now is, one thing I have noticed is it's quite hard, I haven't found a way to exit apps, so I recommend having a controller as well, just so I can use the back button on that. So you can also control the front screen with the controller. So if I boot up ESDE, you can see here that it's detected my input devices through USB. So if I were to try and search for something in here, or input something in here, forgot anywhere I can actually, what is it? Edit, I can just type as normal. And there we are. So there we are, just a simple guide on how to use a dock with your AYN Thor. Obviously there's loads of solutions out there. The exact one I use, I'll leave a link to the description below. As I mentioned before, it is an affiliate link, so if you do buy it through that link, it does help me out. You're under absolutely no obligation to do so. It'd just be greatly appreciated. But there are tons of docks out there, and some of them you can also use as additional storage if you wanted to plug a hard drive in there, for example, and have it a bit more of a kind of centralized console. Those are options that are available to you. So if you like this video, as always, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.